a young woman who's worked all day goes into the bedroom to check on her 2 young sons. After she makes sure that they're all tucked in, she leans down and whispers something in her youngest son's ear. You can do anything. You can be anything. You can be the first black president of the United States. First, give reverence to God, who is the Lord and Savior of my life, Pastor York, any ministers who may be present today, to the leaders of the Highpoint Baptist Church, to my lovely bride, who just put all my business in straight. We'll correct certain aspects of that story as we go through today. To all my brothers and sisters in Christ, good evening. Let's take a step back. That cold winter's night in that small southern town was not in the United States of America. It was in Nuremberg, Germany. And the young woman who was checking on the boys that night was my mother, Vivian C. Kennedy. And what she whispered to me that night, what she whispered to me every single night that she came to check on me, became my anchor and the motivation that fueled the earliest years of my life. You can do anything. You can be anything. You can be the first black president of the United States. Now, when Pastor York extended this invitation to participate in the Black History Month program, I was extremely humbled. Pastor York could have invited anybody. He could have found any one of a number of speakers who could talk about blacks in the military much more eloquently than I can speak about it. At the same time, I felt humble. I also felt challenged. How could I honor a legacy of all those service members who came before us and do it in a way that is appropriate for the sacrifices that allow us to be here today? As I prayed about different ways to construct this talk, I thought about the historical angle, where we could talk about who was the first to do this and who was the first to do that. I also thought about the family angle, where I could talk about my family's military legacy. But somehow, it just didn't feel like the Lord was telling me to go in that direction. You know the wonderful thing about prayer? If you pray and you listen for the answer, it will come to you in a way that you may never expect. For me, my prayer was answered during Mardi Gras. Now, it may seem a little odd to reconcile the concept of Mardi Gras with the concept of spirituality, but that's when it came to me. I had to be listening. I was down at the ship docks when the USS Philippine Sea came into Mobile so that the sailors could celebrate Mardi Gras here. And as I stood there, I was looking at the Naval Junior ROTC and a group of Azalea Trailmates. Remember Azalea Trailmates, you will hear it again. In that moment, I decided to focus on an approach that we're all familiar with. One that helps us understand the thing that we already know. We succeed as a community when we are continually motivated and inspired to cross rivers and move mountains. We succeed as a community when we support and honor each other by giving credit where credit is due. And don't get it twisted. Credit is due. Black history, at its core, is an ongoing story of black excellence. And there is no black excellence without the contributions of black women and a little thing called black girl magic. Black girl magic flows through every aspect of our community, from the church house to the state house to the boardroom. Everyone can point to a grandma, a mother, an auntie, a sister, a cousin, a niece, a teacher, a preacher, a co-worker, a friend, or in my case, a wife, who supported them along the way and in the process propelled them to higher heights. We all know that black girls rock on their own merits because black women have been rocking since the beginning of time. And the military service is no different. From the enlisted ranks to the non-commissioned officer ranks to the flag officer ranks, black women not only support us, they lead us. With this in mind, my theme for today's presentation is Black Excellence in the Military, fueled by faith, driven by work, shouted with Black Girl Magic. Five parts to the presentation today. In the first part, I will share you the story of a young man from 8 Mile, Alabama, who in the summer of 1988 joined the Navy and contributed to Black history by demonstrating Black excellence as an undergraduate student at the Naval Academy. In the second part, I'll introduce you to the 5 Black women who taught that young man from 8 Mile, Alabama, the lessons he needed to learn to make Black history while demonstrating Black excellence as a surface warfare officer in the fleet and a graduate student at the Naval Postgraduate School. In the third part of the presentation, I will prove once and for all that Black excellence in the military is routine. And I'll do that by introducing you to 6 Service Academy graduates from Mobile, Alabama, who are demonstrating Black excellence today. In the fourth part of the presentation, I'll show you that this story of today's Black excellence in the military could be told from any one of a number of different angles, including Black excellence in law enforcement, Black excellence in teaching, or Black excellence in the military, in the medical field. Finally, in today's presentation, by issuing a call to action to celebrate Black history 365 days a year. Does that work for you? Okay. Very briefly. As an undergraduate, I attended the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. For those of you who may not know, the Naval Academy is the undergraduate college of the United States Navy. Its purpose is to provide graduates who can lead sailors in the Navy or Marines in the Marine Corps. The students come from every state in the Union, all U.S. territories, and several foreign countries. When students who are called midshipmen graduate from the Naval Academy, they receive 2 documents: an undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree and a commission as an officer in either the United States Navy or the United States Marine Corps. While attending the Naval Academy as a student, I contributed to Black history in the military 3 times. The first time, I was elected class president by my peers. The second time, I received a bid to the National Debate Tournament, and you can think of that like March Madness, NCAA basketball for debate. That was my activity. And my senior year, I received a national award from Baylor University Glenn R. Cap Debate Forum as the 1992 National Debater of the Year. In each of these situations that I just described, I was either the first or one of the first Blacks in the military to receive that recognition. Upon graduation, I served 2 tours in the operational fleet. During both tours, I contributed to Black excellence by leading sailors through dangerous situations at sea. In one situation, I led a damage control team through a toxic gas emergency while operating in the Gulf of Thailand. In another situation, I led an all-female communications team as they conducted the rescue of an Iranian ship that was sinking in Iranian territorial waters. In each of these unique situations I described, I was awarded commendation. After my operational tours, I returned to the Naval Academy and enrolled in the Naval Postgraduate School, and I finished my time on active duty on staff at the Naval Academy. During my last tour of duty, I continued to make Black history in the military by demonstrating Black excellence. I was the only Black person in the inaugural year of my graduate school program, and I graduated first in my class. Now, the context is, when I was an undergraduate, I graduated 937 in my class of 1,010. But I graduated. And from a competitive ranking perspective, I was one of only 2 black officers on the Commandant staff. The other officer was a graduate of Auburn University, War Eagle. And I was ranked number 1 of 22 competitive lieutenants on that staff. You don't get to be at the Naval Academy on staff unless you were successful when you were in the fleet. So it was a competitive academy. Now that's just about the last time you will hear me talk about it. The biggest contributors to my pursuit of black excellence growing up as a child in 8 Mile, Alabama were members of my family. To be specific, there were 4 black men and 1 black woman who gave me the tools that I needed to go out into the world to compete. The 4 black men all served as enlisted soldiers, sailors, or airmen in the United States Army, Navy, or Air Force. They were my grandfathers, my father, my uncle, and my brother. The black woman was my mother. Is it okay with you if I take a little time to honor my mother? My mother was a Department of Defense civilian. She was a clerk typist by training who started her career typing for the Department of the Navy in Washington, D.C. This was during the time when they still had segregated typing pools. After 31 years of government service, my mother retired, ending her career with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in downtown Mobile. Before we go any further, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Any success that I have had as an individual, any success that I will ever have as member of a team is but for the grace of God and that black woman who went down to work every day at 6:30 a.m. and typed all day long. Now, Vivian C. Kennedy, like so many mothers of her day, prayed and believed, prayed and sacrificed, prayed and worked, and worked, and worked in front-line entry-level jobs. They did this for their entire careers without any promise of promotion or financial windfall. They did this so that you and I would have the opportunities to contribute to black history. You think I'm going to disappoint my mama? No way. By watching my mother, who was fueled by faith and driven by work, manage the inner workings of the Kennedy household while dealing with 1 stubborn Kennedy man, my father, and 2 stubborn Kennedy boys, me and my brother, taught me 2 very important lessons. Lesson number 1, if you want to contribute to black history, develop a long-term plan and the self-discipline to execute that plan. In other words, find a black woman with a vision of the future who will sacrifice her comfort today in order to guarantee your comfort tomorrow. Lesson number 2, if you want to contribute to black history, develop the grit and tenacity to keep moving the family up. 1 day at a time, 1 year at a time, 1 decade at a time, 1 generation at a time. I gotta tell this story. I grew up here in Avon. My parents built a house off of Highpoint Boulevard from the ground up. I went to Indian Springs Elementary School. I played football at the park, right there on Highpoint. While playing football at the park, I discovered I probably wasn't gonna be an athlete. Important lesson to learn. My mother wanted to make sure that we had access to the best academic programs that were possible at the time. So she figured out at that time that it was at Scarborough. So you guys remember back during the early 80s, we had all the school desegregation stuff and all the busing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, my mom tried to get me transferred from Sims, where I was supposed to go, to Scarborough, and they told her no. So she wrote a letter, and they told her no. And then she wrote another letter, and they told her no, and she wrote another letter, and they told her no. So then she started showing up at Barton Academy every Once they got sick of seeing her, they transferred us to Scarborough. I got the academic foundation that I need, right gifted program, math pilot program, et cetera, and that's what put me on the academic foundation to be able to go forward from there. It's about tenacity. And when we have that in our community, we've learned the lesson, we have the opportunity to advance. Now, once I left the confines of my family structure and went out to the world, the biggest contributors to my adult development and pursuit of Black excellence in the military were folks that I met along the way. To be specific, there was one Black man and 4 Black women who gave me the tools that I needed in order to contribute to Black history. The Black man, Adrian Montgomery, I met when I was 10 years old. He was a member of the Yorktown Missionary Baptist Church while I was a member of the Greater Morning Star Baptist Church. We met at the Mobile Sunlight District Congress of Christian Education as crusaders. Remember the name Adrian Montgomery, it will come up again. The 4 women who sprinkled me with a little black girl magic were my performance benchmark, my professor, my leading petty officer, and my choir director. Is it okay with you if I spend a little time honoring these 4 Black women? Okay. My performance benchmark during my college days was a young lady by the name of Angela Gowdy. We met our senior year in high school when we were both in the newspaper on the same day for having received appointments to service academies. My announcement, fairly standard. A simple, Kennedy receives appointment to the Naval Academy in an interior page in the Metro section. Her announcement was completely over the top. It was on the front page of the Metro section. It was a half-page, 4-color ad above the fold. And do you want to know what I saw when I looked at that picture? An azalea trail-made dress. And a huge headline that says, Gowdy receives appointment to West Point. Now, I went home, showed my parents the paper. I was looking for a little bit of sympathy, but they were having none of it. They literally started laughing like it was the funniest thing ever. On one hand, my pop thought it was funny because she was going to West Point. My father was a retired sergeant first class from the United States Army. And when he figured out that I wanted to be a military officer, he encouraged me to apply to West Point. I never got the application. On the other hand, my mother was always looking for opportunities to keep me grounded. And she just had a way of saying something that would just cut you to the very bone. She said, maybe she got a better ad because she's better than you. She was right. She had better grades, better test scores, and a higher class rank. She was a cheerleader, an azalea trail maid, and a leader in the Baker High School JROTC. Lesson number 3. If you want to contribute to Black history, benchmark excellence. In other words, find a Black woman who is competing at a level higher than you are. Just try to keep up. My college professor was Dr. Marlene Brown. She was my instructor for my first composition class and the individual who had the most profound impact on my pursuit of communications excellence. Like most students at the Naval Academy, I took advanced placement English in high school, and I thought I was a pretty good writer. Then I received the results from my first college writing assignment. At the top of my paper were the 3 words that every student dreads. Come, see, me. Before we discussed the feedback on my assignment, Professor Brown wanted to get to know me and my passions. Told a little bit about myself, upbringing, my extracurricular activities, my career goals, and she told me she was disappointed in the quality of my submission. To sum it up quite nicely, I didn't write poorly because I didn't have the ability. I wrote poorly because I wasn't working hard enough in order to deliver excellence. Lesson 4. If you want to contribute to Black history, work hard and deliver excellence all the time. In other words, Find a black woman who will remind you that you have to work twice as hard to get half as far when you're not working to your potential. The enlisted sailor who contributed most to my success as a black officer serving in the fleet was Patricia Hill. Petty Officer Hill was an administrative yeoman by training, originally from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She was assigned to my unit on temporary duty after the unplanned loss of a sailor. Petty Officer Hill was a no-nonsense leading petty officer. By seniority, she would have been the number 3 person in my unit. I was the officer in charge. I had a senior petty officer who was number 2. She would have been person 3. She had a singular focus. She did whatever she needed to do in order to take care of her sailors. One time, I got a call from the commanding officer of the medical center in Guam, complaining about Petty Officer Hill. You see, she had requested medical appointments over a weekend, and the physicians didn't work on the weekend. Well, our ship was only in port for one day. So what she did was, she got all the sailors who needed medical appointments, put them in a van, and drove to the clinic. And then she told the duty officer that she was going to stay there with all of those sailors until they got the medical appointments that they needed. Lesson number 5. If you want to contribute to Black history, take care of the people around you, even when it's hard. My choir director was Dr. Joyce Garrett. She assumed command of the Naval Academy Gospel Choir at the beginning of my junior year. As a Department of Defense civilian contractor, she had the most profound influence on my understanding of accountability. When Dr. Garrett came to the Naval Academy, she inherited a group of midshipmen who were extremely undisciplined musically. Previously, we had been a student-run organization that used gospel choir rehearsal as a combination of a venting session and playtime. And while we experienced some performance success, we did not know what it was like to consistently work hard to deliver excellence. On one particular night, after a challenging practice session, Dr. Garrett said those same 3 words to me that Dr. Brown had written on my paper. Come see me. Now, for anybody who hasn't picked up on it at this point, having someone tell you that they want you to come see them isn't typically for anything good. So when I walked up to her after rehearsal, she kind of gives me that look. A look that reminded me of my mama sitting in the audience when I was acting up in the choir. You know the one I'm talking about. And she asked me a simple question. She said, why aren't you doing more to help me, help us get better? I tried to make some lame excuse because I didn't actually have any leadership role in the choir. She wouldn't have me. She knew that I had been an all-state musician in high school. She knew that I had started an a cappella singing group and had seen our group perform. But most importantly, she knew that I knew what she was trying to accomplish for all of us. Lesson number 6. If you want to contribute to Black history, hold your team accountable. In other words, find a Black woman who reminds you to lead, even when you don't have a title. Now, I mentioned when I was going through my accomplishments earlier that I was elected class president at the Naval Academy by my peers. Here I was, from little old 8 Mile, Alabama, straight ripping my hood, Highpoint for life. I'm unapologetically Black, blessed and highly favored. And I was just elected class president by a bunch of white dudes who had all been team captains, debate champions, class presidents in their own right. I was feeling myself. So about this time, I get a care package from my mom with a letter in it. Now, most college students who get care package at home receive comfort items. Cookie, candy, pictures, something to remind them of home. Not Vivian C. Kennedy. Everything she sent me was practical. If I was on the phone telling her I had an inspection coming up, my mom would send me a care package with some Comet scrubbing bubbles and sponges. In addition to that, my mother used to always send me Bible verses. Now remember, when I was elected class president, feeling myself, the Bible verse she sent me was Romans 12:3. Romans 12:3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Lesson number 7. If you want to contribute to Black history, stay grounded and stay humble. In other words, find a Black woman who will check you when you're thinking of yourself more highly than you ought. Now, I lost my mother in 1997, but in 2015, I got a wife who constantly reminds me, if I get just a little bit out of line, that I need to check myself and remember where I came from and remember what I'm trying to accomplish. 7 simple lessons. Now, one beautiful thing about Black excellence is that it isn't limited to any one person. Another thing about Black excellence is that it's not a rare commodity. I could have done this entire presentation with lessons learned, simply referring to Black Service Academy graduates from Mobile, Alabama. Adrian Montgomery, the name that I mentioned before, the young man who went to Yorktown Baptist Church, he is a 1992 graduate of the United States Naval Academy and one of my classmates. We were the 2 Black young men from Mobile, Alabama who went to the Naval Academy together. Because we had this history together, when he and I were the slowest 2 people in the pool, we were swimming right next to each other. We didn't give up, and somehow we managed to make it through. Bobby Brown, not the member of New Edition Bobby Brown, but the member of the Prince of Peace Catholic Church and a graduate of McGill Tulane. He's a 1997 graduate of the United States Naval Academy and a naval aviator. He was recently honored at the USS Alabama Battleship Memorial Park because he was the first Black commanding officer of HSM-49 Helicopter Squadron. Lieutenant Commander Jada Aleda Johnson attended B.C. Rain and Alabama School of Math and Sciences. She is a 2003 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, who also served as president of the gospel choir under Dr. Joyce Garrett that I introduced you to previously. She's a graduate of the Naval Nuclear Power School and served for 12 years as a surface warfare officer before transitioning to foreign area service. She continues to serve today. And do you remember that young lady who was in the newspaper the same day as me, wearing her Isaiah Trailmaid dress? Angela Gowdy, now Angela Mislevich, is a 1992 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. She is a medical doctor. She is a colonel in the United States Army, and she continues to serve today. But it didn't stop with her. Her sister Ashley is a 1999 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, and also a doctor. But it didn't stop with Ashley. Their baby sister Stacy is a 2002 West Point graduate. Left the service, earned her MBA, and is an executive at Microsoft today. The daughters of Mark and Phyllis Gowdy were the first 3 women to graduate from West Point, Black, white, or other. All the these people I just mentioned from Mobile, Alabama. Now, my focus has been black excellence in the military, but black excellence exists in every industry. I could have done this exact same presentation today talking about black women that graduated from John S. Shaw High School, that went into nursing, started at Bishop State, and ended up with doctorates from either the University of Alabama or the University of South Alabama. Black excellence permeates our entire culture. So now the call to action. What happens tomorrow? It's easy to do it within the confines of these four walls during a Black History Month program. But what do we do going forward? So I told you guys I was going to spend a little bit of time talking about my wife after she put all my business in the street. So it didn't actually take me 12 years to ask her out. It just took her 12 years to figure out that I was trying to holler. And then once she finally figured out that I was trying to holler, she almost messed it up. But fortunately she didn't. And she gave me a blessing. I told Pastor York that I wasn't going to get political today. We'll get political tomorrow. But there was a point last summer where I ran for the United States Senate. There was a point in time when our field operations team was 2 people, me and my wife, out at the Mobile Civic Center, putting flyers on cars when it was just the 2 of us. This woman has taught me more in the time we've been married than I could have ever thought I was capable of learning. And her commitment to community is the thing that drives and motivates both of us to want to do it from 8 Mile, Alabama. When we talk about what happens tomorrow, it goes back to the steps that come out of the lessons that I learned from all of those black women. Step 1, develop a long-term plan and exercise the self-discipline to execute that plan. Step 2, develop the grit and tenacity to keep moving the family up. And once you move the family up, you start moving the community up. Step 3, benchmark, study excellence. We study excellence inside the community. We study excellence outside of the community as well. But we don't make any excuses. We find the best and we learn from the best. Step 4, we work hard. And when we've worked hard and we think there's nothing else we could possibly give, we dig down deep and we work harder. Step 5, we take care of the people around us all the time. We support ourselves. We support our businesses. But step 6 is equally important. When we have businesses or we have activities in our community that we know are not in keeping with the sacrifices that were made by the people who came before us, we hold those people accountable. We need to hold each other accountable. And finally, as we start the process of continuing to move our community forward, we stay grounded and we remain humble. Thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts.